Now, when you're talking ghosts, there's a couple of historic figures that are just definitely, intimately connected with the local ghost stories. One of these, I'm going to start with the earlier ones, is Luke Hill Ike. Luke Hill Ike was neat. He was up around Kading Township. Okay, Kading Township, yes, I'm aware that there's two Kading Townships, east and west. I have a tendency to talk about them as one unit because, there's what, 11 people between them? I don't know why they made two Kading Townships. There is not much of a population up there, and never has been. And that is part of their history. Back, pre-Civil War, the Underground Railroad came through here and ran pretty much up Water Street. There's a stop on Water Street, private home that was part of the Underground Railroad, up through present-day Renova, and then into Kading. Now, some of the escaped slaves went north to Olean, New York, and some went to Canada, but a lot of them stopped and settled around Kading Township, figuring it's really remote up here, so who's going to find us? And they weren't wrong. To this day, that's one of the most remote spots in the state. If you really, really want to be away from people, and you drive through Renova, stop on the other side of Renova, and it's still not remote enough for you, your next stop is Kading Township. And a lot of them brought their legends and stuff with them. So there were a lot of stories of ghosts and things out there. And he was the grandson of one of these escaped slaves, Luke Hill Ike, Isaac Gaines. Isaac Gaines was his real name. And he was described in these old stories as sort of a supernatural bounty hunter. He was the guy you'd go to if you were having ghost problems. These days, apparently, that's me. But back in the 1800s, this was Luke Hill Ike. And what I love about Luke Hill Ike was so often, his stories would involve this mix of magic and mysticism and hard-headed practicality, okay? A lot of these were written down by George Roane, who was, by the way, his nephew, for a magazine later, which is where I discovered them. All these neat stories of curses and ghosts and monsters and such. And Luke Hill Ike, like I said, there was a mix of his methods, okay? In the stories, he would always go and, pick the correct herbs and plants, okay? Dry them out, grind them and have them in just the right amounts, measure the amounts very carefully, start a fire, and then cast a spell by putting the correct herbs into the fire, burning them, and then the spell would tell him, what witch was responsible for casting the spell against this family in the first place, and then he'd grab a shotgun and go burn down their cabin. That is kind of a common method with it. Luke Hill Ike occasionally consulted with a ghost up there, the Swamp Angel. Oh, wow. The Swamp Angel, and I love the Swamp Angel story. This comes from Young Woman's Town. In the days before North Bend was known as North Bend, it was known as Young Woman's Town. And the stories wide vary, but they all pretty much agree that there was a young woman, usually in the stories Native American, who drowned right in that area. And one of the old legends is that if you need help and you go up to the swamp and you ask her for help, her ghost will come and assist you. So this is a helpful ghost. Mostly, I'd imagine, moral support. But, Luke Hill Ike often would consult with the Swamp Angel on these things, who would describe to him the kind of spell he'd need to cast or whatever, tell him what to do about these ghosts. There was one story based on the Gaines murder, actually. Now, this was, by the way, an actual murder. Okay, the people of Kading Township had a way of getting this paranormal stuff out of the real historic incidents, which I love. It was William and Robert Gaines, and one of them shot the other. I've been told by some of the descendants of this family that it was self-defense. And they have kind of a funny definition of self-defense. One of them shot the other from the woods through an open window of his cabin while he was eating dinner. That doesn't strike me as he was in imminent danger of defending himself, okay? But they were holding a dance up there in Kading Township soon after. Okay? They held the occasional dance up there because, they were a little short on entertainment. All right? The lack of entertainment in Kading Township is kind of reflected on the census record at one point. There was a woman who lived up there. Her name was Gaines, and she was listed in the census. Her occupation was had 27 children. Because again, what else was there to do up in Katy Township, in the 1800s? So they were holding a dance in one of the cabins, and the ghost of the murdered man showed up. Now they couldn't see it, but he had a habit of always wearing these big, heavy boots. And they heard the disembodied sound of these boots clomping in. And then they heard the sound of the boots starting to dance. And they just kept dancing, and everybody ran, and Blue Hill Ike had been there. He was actually playing the violin. And he was asked to get rid of the ghost. So he traded off the violin to some other guy who could play the violin, and he went and consulted with the Swamp Angel. And he said he couldn't play the violin for somebody he couldn't see, so the Swamp Angel told him how to get the herbs and cast a spell. He had I'm working from memory here, but he had to find an herb named Devil's Dude. Now, it seems to have been a localism. I've tried looking it up, and I can't find exactly what this was, but a lot of these herbs had little nicknames like that. And he went and he burned that, cast a spell, and suddenly he could see the smoky outline of the ghost dancing. So he took the violin back, started playing, and got faster and faster and faster until finally the boots broke through the floor of the cabin and the ghost fell through and disappeared. And that was a typical day in the life of Blue Hill Ike.